Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I'm Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we have the Duality of Man.
Today we're talking
It-
about today we're talking about the three recent court decisions that have come down from the Supreme Court. Those would be regarding affirmative action, regarding free speech, and regarding student loan debt forgiveness.
and it's a it's an interesting week, ladies and gentlemen, and we will get into the decisions as we go.
There was lots of reading over the weekend.
Hmm?
I said there was lots of people reading over the weekend.
Well, that's always nice. I say offend all of those who predispose themselves to be offended. Honestly. Because it's better for all parties involved. The people who want to be offended get to be offended, and the rest of us get to watch them squirm. So yay!
Let's see. First, let's talk about affirmative action. Uh, the court struck down race conscious admissions programs at Harvard and the University of North Carolina, effectively prohibiting affirmative action policies long used to raise the number of black, Hispanic, and other underrepresented minority students on American campuses. By the way, I'm reading this off of Reuters, so please filter the bias.
Yeah. Also, I find it funny that the fieriest of spats over this happened between two black justices on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that was funny. It ruled that affirmative action admissions program that considered applicants' race in ways like Harvard and UNC did violate the U.S. Constitution's promises of equal protection under the law. Which, quite frankly, it did, because when you are, taking somebody's race into account and raising up someone else and lowering down someone else by dint of their race, um, that is racism, and that is against the law. Like, just because you like the person that it favors doesn't mean that it isn't against the law, and doesn't mean it's not racism.
Right in 1945 Germany. There, I'm sure. I'm sure Hitler would have argued that the Jew is so overrepresented in college admissions that we absolutely have to encourage the Aryans more. But that too would be fucking racist.
I mean, I could understand at the time when this policy was put into place how people were actively being discriminated against because of their race, with Jim Crow having recently ended and the Civil Rights Bill being signed. But it's what 50 years later, more than 50 years. Like, we have
Yeah.
had more than enough time for the nation to progress. It has progressed, even though some people like to pretend that it hasn't. And policies like this, while they were intended to help 50 years ago, are now an active detriment to racial harmony in this country. Because if you are knocking people down because they're a certain race and giving people a better chance because they're another race, that's going to cause racial division.
And here's the other thing. Every argument I've seen in favor of affirmative action is, well, so many black people and people of other races are in redlined districts and they're poor and they're inner city kids and yada yada yada. So, obvious question, why aren't we doing it based on class and instead of race? Because if we did it based on class, we could at least still have some semblance of strict meritocracy of, you give the person the right to college education as and when they, fucking earn it and demonstrate some determination towards it instead of, well, the government is paying me to because I have the correct racial components, therefore I can just laze my way through a 4-year degree and it counts in exactly the same way as, you know, the poor white trash kid who worked his ass off from sunrise to sunset for 12 years to get into college.
I mean, there was a time when college was the way to lift yourself out of poverty. Go there, get an education, learn a skill or a trade, and then you could go and make a life for yourself and earn decent money. But now, like that college is basically just become indoctrination centers. I mean, a lot of people would be better off just not going to college.
Yeah, moral and moral and abstract actualization camps more than education. I think it's safe to say that college is no longer no the way.
Yeah, and college isn't the only way that a person can lift himself out of poverty. Like you can go to a trade school, and people with trades actually can make a lot of money, like an electrician. Like you don't need to go to 4 years, to take a bunch of classes that you don't need for the major that you want, and like pay a whole bunch of money and get into debt just to have a good life. Like it's
Ah,
not
but
necessary.
but only the plebs bother to have, literal straightforward careers where they work with actual things. Real civilized human beings and aristocrats work with abstract bullshit, don't you know?
And the thing is, like colleges don't even really serve the purpose that they were originally intended for, because a lot of people will graduate college and still be really, really dumb. Like they may know like something about what they're intended to do, but a lot of time, like they'll get their head filled with like ideology, some of what they actually wanted to learn, and then go out in the world and only be able to do like half-assed at what they wanted.
Well, it
Me,
that's the ironic thing, though. In a lot of ways, the consensus and the ideological orthodoxy actually makes people dumber because you take someone who has a mind worth a damn, and you fill them full of this abstract woo woo nonsense, and you drill it into them so fervently that it becomes a replacement for their personality. And now, even though they have the raw intelligence, they can't make use of it because it's all getting channeled towards a counterproductive at best, actively, destructive at worst ideology that is both overly simplistic and makes no fucking sense. And you
yeah,
rob them of any ability to see any frameworks outside of that because to them, this is just normal now. This is just how the world works in their heads. And they don't see any reason why any other variable should ever be taken into account, assuming they even acknowledge that those variables exist half the time.
meanwhile, somebody who didn't go to college and instead focused on learning just the thing that he wanted to learn, like maybe through like getting a job and learning on the job, or using some of the resources that are now available online, are probably going to be better equipped to do the job than somebody that went to college for 4 years. And
But college gives you the abstract authority, and we all know that's what really matters in the realm of the aristocracy. Derp.
yeah, college is no longer an institution of learning. It's now more like a status symbol, where you could say that you're a college graduate and therefore you are above the plebeians who did
A
not
breeding
put the
ground
degree.
for aristocrats in a system that allegedly has none.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, old school aristocrats were usually genuinely well educated.
Yeah, noble. And they also had this thing called the noblesse oblige, i.e., they were accountable to their subjects in some way, whereas modern aristocrats have all the pomp and circumstance, none of the competency, none of the meritocracy, and none of any obligation to give two shits about the plebs, except in the abstract, where it's actually going to be counterproductive.
Yeah, I believe it was uh, Joy Reid from MSNBC. I believe she actually went on air and said that she would not have gotten into her university if not for affirmative action. My first thought was, "We know, Joy, we know."
Well, that, and, well, then you shouldn't have gone to university then. Now, mind you, I went to a university called Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, or at least a suburb of Dayton called Fairborn. and that university is known for its IEP programs and for its accommodations for students with disabilities. That's why like 15 of my classmates um, in Wright State were of some form of disabled persuasion, but they were all worthy to be there. I'm not disparaging any of my classmates in that regard. So there's some argument for specialized universities. For example, if you wanted to have a black only university, I would be questioning your ethos a bit, but Bob's your uncle, go right ahead. And if they did the sensible thing and did this based on class and ability rather than race or gender, I would also be fine with that. But you certainly don't get to institute it on a state level because the state, at least nominally, is supposed to not have any ideological biases because separation of church and state. I really it's one of those things that I wish the founders had been just a little bit more prescient on. Not that they weren't plenty prescient already, but the idea that a secular ideology can be just as dogmatic and consensus based and woo woo as a religion.
Yeah, absolutely. And regarding ability, as you mentioned, like a lot of these affirmative action cases who got in universities, not on their own merit, ended up dropping out. And who did that benefit? Now they didn't get the degree, and also if they took out a bunch of student loans, now they have all this debt to pay off. So, like, who did you help in those scenarios?
Yeah, it's literally, well, it benefits us in the abstract, so who gives a fuck about the literal interpretation? And I fucking hate that pseudo intellectual nonsense of it benefits us or it makes sense in the thematic abstract, so who gives a fuck about the literal interpretation? Literal straightforward interpretation matters, goddammit, and I will die on that hill if I have to.
A lot of people are saying that now a lot of you know minority students won't be able to get into college, or maybe you convince them that they need to work just a bit harder in order to get what they want, which would benefit them in the long run.
Or maybe colleges should be something worth getting into if they're going to cost all this much money, and
Right.
b maybe they shouldn't be the only option to be considered a valid human being by the wider society. TM.
Unfortunately, just because this ruling has come down doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be the end of it. As universities like Harvard have already said that they're going to require an essay about the student's background as part of their admissions questions.
Again, I have to honestly, I would go directly the other way. Like I would erase any personal details from the admissions application or the resume or whatever, like anything that requires some kind of documentation to get a job or get a position. It should be depersonalized as much as possible so that the only things that are applicable are the qualifications and the merits, with maybe some small asterisk for class and only class, or an actual meaningful disability. Like, because here's the thing, I'm hesitant to say no programs like this at all, because there are highly intelligent dyslexic kids who but for that one error would be geniuses. And there are highly intelligent autistic kids who have special needs that need to be catered to. But once that's done, they become, living supercomputers and shit. Like there are those cases. So it's not like, damn the human element entirely, but anything relating to identity that doesn't have a direct and concrete and literal effect like that, like something like class or disability in those veins, hang it. Just it is immaterial to the conversation. I don't care about your race. I don't care about your gender. I don't care about your background. I don't even necessarily care if you're a particularly moral person. This is an institution of higher learning and an institution where hopefully something meaningful and concrete is going to come out of. So if you are capable in those vectors, then fuck it. Everything else is immaterial.
Now, this particular case that was being ruled on was specifically about universities. However, I do hope that this decision does spread to the corporate world because, as I'm sure you're aware, corporate affirmative action could be just as bad as academic affirmative action.
Will the real ESG please stand up? Uh, uh-huh. But there is a dark cloud, or there is a dark lining around this mostly silver cloud, which I caught, and I feel like it's worth bringing up because this is after all, at the end of the day, supposed to be a men's rights show first and foremost, which is all this talk about race is all well and good, and fuck racism entirely, and fuck anyone who gives a shit about race entirely because race is utterly unimportant. But addressing the men's rights flavored elephant in the room, nothing in here explicitly states also don't discriminate on gender, and it must be said that the ratio of female college graduates to male college graduates is roughly 60-40 and dropping. So yeah, as much as I cheer that we're no longer discriminating based on race, the woman card still remains unseated from its throne at the top of the pyramid. And never forget my male friends who find themselves in some other minority category as well. You will always, at the end of the day, be women and minorities. That's the category you're under. And the only reason trans women sometimes get counted above cis women is because these people think in the abstract, and in their minds the trans woman is a better exemplar of femininity than a cis woman who isn't a female stereotype or a feminist. That's why they can think to themselves that Dylan Mulvaney is more of a woman than Alison Tiemann or Karen Strawn for some fucking reason.
I mean, I hope that this case extends to the gender divide in colleges. I doubt it. I think that we would actually need somebody to sue specifically on those grounds. But if they've already gotten this far in regards to race, I'm pretty gender might be just around the corner.
Well, the problem there is we be a gynocentric species, and evolution is a son of a bitch. That's why I kind of. That's why I don't mean to shit on anyone's parade, but I did kind of cringe a little bit when I realized, wait a minute, race is in writing, so good on that, but nobody said anything about gender, and all other things being equal, we are a gynocentric species, so the woman card is still all powerful. And again, and you can call me a misogynist if you like, but when men are even minorly competent, it's seen as misogynistic patriarchy. So what, pray tell, does it mean when the ratio of women to men in a pro-women system is 60-40 and dropping?
There have been some interesting opinions from the Supreme Court regarding this decision on affirmative actions. I want to read two of them. The first being from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. I don't have her
I
full opinion here because, quite frankly, that would be too long to read. Uh, but here's a quick excerpt. It says, "The best that could be said of the majority's perspective is that it proceeds ostrich like from the hope that preventing consideration of race will end racism. But if that is its motivation, the majority proceeds in vain," Jackson wrote. First of all, not considering race literally is the end of racism. I mean, that's how racism works. You are judging something based on the race of the people involved. If you're not doing that, it's literally impossible to be racist.
Okay, the reason, my dear, why racism is bad, okay, to quote Mr. Mackey from South Park, is because race is unimportant, and that is pretty much the only reason why racism is bad. It's because racism is meaningless and unimportant. If you proceed from the assumption that racism is unimportant, but only when it doesn't benefit me, derp, um, then you are fucked in the head. Racism is unimportant, and that's why we should abolish it. If race all of a sudden became important, then we would have to reevaluate that assumption. But I will die on the hill of racism is bad because race itself is unimportant, as and when, we don't have any data to the contrary. And we don't, as far as I know.
She
Sorry, Richard
also,
Spencer, but accuse isn't enough of an argument.
what she says, ghost-sized race-based gaps exist with respect to the health, wealth, and well-being of American citizens. They were created in the distant past, but have indisputably been passed down to the present day through the generations. Notice how nothing she says is based in any, you know, interpretation of the Constitution. It's just my ideology.
Well, it's also once again attempting to speak with that the form. Like, I think I've referenced this before. It might not have been on this show. It might have been on one of the other ones. But notice that these people never use the affirmative I. They always try to use the abstract royal we in either direct terms or indirect terms, i.e., they can never speak for I want this, I think this, I presuppose this. It's always we know X, we think Y, our community X, Y, and Z. It's never I am speaking as an individual agent for my own interest. It's always I speak with the moral authority of everyone who's ever looked like me, even the ones who disagree, because those people get their card revoked because I am in charge of this somehow.
Yeah. All right, now let's read Clarence Thomas's opinion on the matter.
This
The
is glorious.
solution, the solution to our nation's racial problems thus cannot come from policies grounded in affirmative action or some other conception of equity. Thomas writes, racialism simply cannot be undone by different or more racialism. Uh, Take that, Ibram X. Kendi. Instead, the solution announced in the second founding is incorporated in our Constitution that we are all equal and should be treated equally before the law without regard to our race. Only that promise could allow us to look past our differing skin colors.
Based?
Uh, Extremely. Elsewhere, in his concurring opinion, Thomas lays bare the left's flawed and quite racist beliefs about different races. In fact, all racial categories are little more than stereotypes, suggesting that immutable characteristics somehow conclusively determine a person's ideology, beliefs, and abilities. Of course, that is false. Members of the same race do not all share the exact same experiences and viewpoints. Far from it, he explained. The black person from rural Alabama surely has different experiences than a black person from Manhattan or black first generation immigrants from Nigeria, in the same way that a white person from rural Vermont has a different perspective from a white person from Houston, Texas. Yes, the hive mind is not real, as I've
Yeah,
been
based,
saying ad
based
nauseum.
again. I love the basedness. It's glorious.
See, despite this obvious reality, Thomas reminds that universities' racial policies suggest that racial identity alone constitutes the being of the race or the man. That is the same naked racism upon which segregation itself was built. Exactly. Thomas
Based?
Riley, Thomas Riley concludes. Small wonder then that these policies are leading to increasing racial polarization and friction. Yes.
Yes. I would go so far as to say, Chad, yes to that.
All right, here's where he starts roasting. Thomas also refuses to hold back on his fellow justices' flawed views of affirmative action and mistaken interpretation of the Constitution in his opinion. In evaluating the argument made in the dissenting opinion filed by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, Thomas brings the fire. Justice Jackson uses her broad observations about statistical relationships between races and selecting measures of health, wealth, and well-being to label all blacks as victims. Her desire to do so is unfathomable to me. I cannot deny the great accomplishments of black Americans, including those who succeeded despite long odds. Nor do Justice Jackson's statistics regarding a correlation between levels of health, wealth, and well-being between selected racial groups prove anything. Of course, none of those statistics are capable of drawing a direct causal link between race rather than socioeconomic status or any other factor in individual outcome. So Justice Jackson supplies the link herself, the legacy of slavery and the nature of inherited wealth. This, she claims, locks blacks into a seemingly perpetual inferior caste. Such a view is irrational, it is an insult to individual achievement, and cancerous to young minds seeking to push through barriers rather than consign themselves to permanent victimhood.
I I I the like 2017 era SJW talking points coming out of a Supreme Court justice. I love it so much. It's just I also just love the like polite smackdown. It's literally like my right honorable colleague can go fuck herself in no uncertain.
I never thought I would see a man craft a flamethrower out of words.
I love it. I love it so much. I saw it on the Lotus Eaters, and like every time he mentions her name, it just gets more and more and more. And by the way, everything you think is wrong, and you are immoral for thinking them in the first place. It's so
Well,
it reminds
there's
it actually reminds me of that one Star Trek: The Next Generation episode where Captain Picard is fighting that species that is like overly contract oriented. he just he just like turned their own contract on them, and then when they GTFO, Riker turns to him and goes, "You enjoyed that," and he just goes, "You're goddamn right." Like that is I oh my god.
there's more. So yeah, Justice Jackson's race-infused worldview falls flat at each step, Thomas declares. Individuals are the sum of their unique experiences, challenges, and accomplishments. Absolutely. What matters is not the barriers they face, but how they choose to confront them, he notes. And their race is not to blame for everything good or bad that happens in their lives. A contrary, myopic worldview based on individual skin color to the total exclusion of their personal choices is nothing short of racial determinism.
Do we even need to be here? We just just all things that he has said are not only true but so inarguably true that I can't even add. It's just this is glorious. This is actual intellectualism. Like and my fucking god, it's so refreshing. No frills, no appeals to authority, no nothing. Just behold the glory of my logical argument, refute it if you can, mortals. Like this is again the just sheer unmitigated basedness of it. I love it. Like where did this kind of actual intellectualism go that isn't based on some kind of abstract aristocratic authority or ideological presupposition? Oh my god, it's glorious.
Let's see. There's a bit more. Okay, place. Let's see. The court's opinion rightly makes clear that Greta is, for all intents and purposes, overruled, and it sees the university's admission policies for what they are: rudderless, race-based preferences designed to ensure a particular racial mix in their entering classes. I think exactly right, because all these people talk about is how many percentages of each race they have in their universities.
Yeah, and all of the diverse quote unquote students they have only see themselves as an extension of the hive mind of blackness or Asianness or whatever other fucking hive mind it is. And frankly, I find that horrifying on their part. Not that they see themselves that way, but that someone convinced them to see themselves that way. Like that's some Lovecraftian mind control IRL sort of shit. I can't imagine, foregoing all of my individual merits in the name of speaking as every disabled person ever, or every crippled person, or every gay person ever. it would be hell. I don't understand how not only can they not see how horrible that is, but how they can see it as a virtue. It's incomprehensible, honestly.
What right do you have to speak for somebody else that you've never even met?
Well, more than that, why would you want to? How is it you have such, contempt for who you are as an individual that you would rather lean on the legacy of every person who's ever come before you in the broadest possible terms than ever y- again, why do you feel compelled to use the royal we instead of the affirmative I? That is at the heart of this. Why must you be a identitarian Borg instead of a person claiming what is theirs by right of their own deeds, thoughts, skills and actions?
I think because they believe that acting as an agent of the collective gives them some form of moral superiority, also some form of shield because of the genuine egregious things that have happened to some people of those categories that they can then hide behind when they are rightfully attacked for their own ignorant views.
Well, I think it's also, and I'm going to play a little bit of the devil's advocate here. Is it possible that they just don't see themselves as in any way worthwhile without the power of the royal we?
I mean,
Like,
to
do they
become
just
some
do they just hate themselves and yet simultaneously, are short-sighted enough to only care about themselves? Like, are they in that catch-22 where I only care about myself, but I also hate myself? Because if that's the case, then I actually feel a little bad.
I think it's because they want to be respected, and rather than doing the hard work that it takes to gain the qualities that would confer respect, it's easier to become a part of the collective and just demand it.
Well, it's also an ideological thing whereby they see hard what we would see as hard work as oppression. And don't get me wrong, there is a line after which that's at least arguable. Like, I mean, again, we're a men's rights show, and we've talked endlessly about how we literally, in a lot of cases, treat men of all kinds like they are a slave class, and like their humanity is immaterial to us unless they do things. So, like,
Yeah, I understand, but let's see. We have two more decisions to talk about. Let's see.
what is
The
the
next
name of
one,
what is the name of Judge Based there? Who I will be buying a drink if I ever meet in real life.
Clarence Thomas, and the left hate him because he is a genuinely conservative black man, and he pushes for all the things that that make them squirm.
But like that, what he just said though isn't even necessarily conservative. It's classically liberal. You could literally see the same sentiment coming out of a 19th century abolitionist, or John Locke and John Stuart Mill, or hell, even like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X probably would agree with all of that. Like, there's nothing conservative about that. That's just anti-social justice. Like, literally, left-wing people from 2017 and backwards who were part of the anti-SJW movement literally said, albeit slightly less eloquently, those exact same words.
In this particular decision, I believe this was really the correct constitutional interpretation of the law in regard in that everybody is treated equally regardless of race. But
Yeah,
he
it's
was
just
also,
it's just true and rational at the end of the day.
he was also a major force in the overturning of Roe v. Wade that happened last year.
I mean, I'm not surprised considering the person who initially, resulted in the institution of Roe v. Wade denounced it and became guilt ridden later in life. When the person who wanted the thing in the first place is like, oh dear, I've made a horrible mistake, what else are we supposed to fucking do?
Uh, now let's go on to the case regarding free speech. Again, I'm reading this off of Reuters, so please filter the bias. The court on June 30th dealt a blow to LGBT rights by ruling that the constitutional right to free speech allows certain businesses to refuse to provide services for same-sex weddings despite state anti-discrimination law. That is
Are we
not
do- are,
true.
are we doing the bake the cake thing again? Is
Well,
that
the
what
thing is,
this amounts to?
I mean, basically, but the decision that they gave is that you cannot command someone to, create an expressive work that is against their beliefs. So, like, you cannot go to a Jewish baker and ask them to make a swastika cake.
Okay, I'm in the sort of gray area on this one because here's the thing. Had the person making the cake not known what the layer cake was for, because that's what a tiered cake, that's what a wedding cake is. It's a tiered cake. So what if you don't support gay marriage? Just sell them a blank tier cake
No, no,
and
no. That's what he
and
that's what he was willing to do. The issue came in when he was asked to write a message on the cake.
oh, okay, well then yeah, I'm totally on this guy's side then. Because that's where I've always been with the bake the cake thing. On the one hand, freedom of expression, yada yada, but at the same time, all other things being equal, it's just a tier cake. So unless they want any particular aesthetic alterations to the thing, like in the case of the swastika cake, um, I don't give a fuck. Just sell your product, and if you're morally triggered by it, then GTFO at that point.
Yeah,
But if the
but
if the person literally offered to do what I consider the sensible thing to be of, you know, sell the layer cake without any alterations for or against, and have them take it to another cake designer if they want alterations to it, or have them be satisfied with the blank one. Because that's the thing. I would, speaking as a gay person, mind you, if I find my significant other and we get married and the bakery, down the road happens to be anti-LGBT, one, I'm not going to tell them what the cake is for. I'm just going to order a tier cake. Two, as long as they are willing to sell me a tier cake and not deny me service, period, I am fine with them, not putting any more effort into it than the bare universal egalitarian minimum. Like that to me is fine. So yeah, if this guy is where I'm at with it, where it's like I'll sell you a blank layer cake and the message doesn't matter as long as I have your business. Like if he's willing to do that, then yeah, this guy's totally in the right.
yeah, I believe the ruling is specifically in regards to expressive works. So did not so like just a basic service like the blank tiered cake that you mentioned. Like that's not a problem. But like if it has like a specific message on it that the creator would object to, you cannot force them to then make that message. Like you can't like say go to a gay bakery and force them to make a cake with an anti-gay message
God
on it.
hates God hates, 3 letter F word, etc.
Yeah, you cannot make them make that cake or write that message.
Yeah. And again, I had to clarify the sort of gray area here because actively refusing them service based on ideology is bullshit. But if it actually is compelled speech or compelled expression, then and only then would I be on their side. But because at the end of the day, this could easily turn into, if we don't have that gray area, it could easily turn into oh, I'm a baker, I bake bread, but I ideologically disagree with you and I don't want your custom, so I'm not selling you bread, kind of thing.
And I see a lot of people like acting that this is specifically a ruling against LGBT people, but like I said, this goes both ways. Like they have the right to not be forced to write messages that they don't like. So like I
Yeah,
don't see why this would specifically feel like they would target them. Like the only thing that I can think of is because a lot of these people, from what I see, they will go to like say a Christian bakery and
on
then like
purpose to make a thing of it,
yeah, to make a thing of it.
to be
Like
an activist, basically.
yeah, and then when they like say no, they'll say, "Oh, look at this, baker who refused to make the cake that I want," specifically knowing that it was a Christian business, and you specifically went there because you knew they would do that.
Now, mind you, my middle position opinion, my a blank cake bigot, basically, would apply just as much to a gay baker who deals with straight customers or fundamentalist Christian customers or whatever. Like they are not entitled to your freedom. They are not entitled to your expression. They are, however, entitled to your business because you are a business.
So, what do you think of all the people who are like saying this is specifically, anti-gay or whatever?
Again, I see it as cutting both ways. You don't have the right to compel creative input from anyone, but you do have the right to walk into a bakery and be served. So as long as there's as long as everyone is abiding by what I consider the sensible middle position of bake a blank cake with no messaging, um, then I see nothing I see nothing further need be done. If they violate that rule, if they say I'm not even going to bake you a cake, period, because I consider the act of baking itself to be a creative act, then that person is being an ideological cunt, and they should get fucked. But if they're willing to abide by the sensible middle position of bake a blank, tier cake and have it, send them off and tell them to have a nice day, then all bets are off. You've done the universal thing that every customer is entitled to by the very nature of the business. So nothing further need be compelled. However, and this is the other asterisk I will give. If the gay person is willing to pay more because of the ideological vagaries of it, then I would actually flip again and say, well, they're willing to basically pay your ideological what's the Islamic word, the dhimmi tax, basically. So you know you you're now refusing more money to accommodate your ideology, and at that point you are the idiot again. But
Well, in
but if it's
terms
a
of
case
things
of
like
I want the exact same thing without even having to account for things that I obviously know to be the case, then yeah, we're back on square one again.
well, a lot of people consider religion, their faith more important than something, physical like money. It's like just selling the cake would not be a problem, but like you're forced, you would then be like attempting to like bribe them to, create an expression that would be against what they uh, sincerely believe.
Yeah, I'm not saying they shouldn't have to negotiate the price, but I am saying everyone has a dollar amount beyond which they will go. So you know that's my sort of compromise on the other end of it, which is you want to be an activist little shit and go specifically to a bakery you're ideologically opposed to just to make a thing of it. Pay more. That's my thought. And if you're willing to pay more, if you're willing to pay enough to put the person's conscience at ease, then yeah, why not? But
To be fair, for a lot of
you
people,
don't
that
get to
would
make a
be
nuisance of yourself and then whine.
for a lot of people that would be a very high number.
Well, yeah, and so be it. Like them's the rules. That's capitalism for you. Um, for a lot of people, that would be a very high number, and so be it. But again, there's always the cheaper option of just have them bake you a blank cake. Possibly don't even tell them the reason for it, and then because that's the thing. Why is it that you need to tell the baker why you need the cake for? Like to me that doesn't make any sense. Like even just rainbow colored, even just a rainbow colored cake. There's nothing in as much as it's going to trigger the LGBT activists. There's nothing inherently gay about a rainbow. Lots of kids have rainbow themed things, or just people like a lot of different colors. So rainbow themed things happen all the time. So who gives a fuck? But if you go out of your way to tell someone to be ideologically opposed to, you know, LGBT stuff that you want an LGBT wedding cake, then of course you're going to get shit for it. And of course, the only sensible option is they're going to bake you a blank cake or a rainbow frosted cake with no messaging on it whatsoever and then ship you out the door, as is their right.
I
Now,
mean, you could
if
just go
they,
to a bakery that doesn't mind, but like in this situation, you are going out of your way to be a headache for somebody.
right, and that results in my two solutions of either you give them a blank, universal checks all the boxes but doesn't have any creative expression in it cake and then sit them out the door, or you make them pay more. And that's it, and that's the other thing. My suggestion of the you want me to go against my principles, pay me more option does prevent this kind of activism in some way, because if there's at least that option of, okay, you want me to go out of my way to use my creative expression against my own stated beliefs, then you're gonna have to pay up, bitch, or you're gonna have to be happy with the basic bare minimum cake. Now, mind you, there is one asterisk to my basic bare minimum cake idea, which is I could see someone going out of their way to make a bad cake and pass it off as doing the bare minimum and calling it a day. If that happens, then once again, I would consider that a breach of contract. You do the job that's in front of you to the same standard as you would for everyone else, and once that job is done, then I don't give a fuck if you refuse creative input. But if you try to cheat someone who is paying you the same as everyone the fuck else, then you are once again the asshole. This to me is a case of the rotating arrow of who is the asshole, because there are circumstances whereby one party is the asshole, and there are circumstances whereby another party is the asshole. But my solution is just create a situation where nobody is the asshole, and then once that's done, no one is entitled to anything else.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Blind commerce isn't really the way to go.
Honestly, again, why would you even need to tell your baker what the cake you want them to bake is for? If they ask you and then you tell them, then it's somewhat their fault. But in most circumstances, I need a dozen cookies, or I need a cake, or even if it's a tiered cake, like I need this much cake, or I need this much cookies, or this many pies, or what have you. That shouldn't require a so what is the special occasion conversation, just at all.
I mean, even if they ask, you just don't have to tell them.
Or just go, I would rather not discuss it. It's personal. Now, mind you, that might lead someone to conclude that it's for, gay shenanigans, and that leads us back to the if they actively cut corners providing you the service they would provide everyone else, then you can sue their pants off. But, as long as they do the exact same work as they do for everyone else, and it doesn't impinge on their creative impulse, then so be it.
All right, I want to get to the last one. This one is a bit less complicated uh, than the other two. The justices on June 30th blocked President Joe Biden's plan to cancel 430 billion in student loan debt. The court invoked the major questions doctrine, a muscular judicial approach that gives judges vast, broad discretion to invalidate executive agencies' actions of vast economic and political significance unless Congress clearly authorized them. Like, exactly. This regarding the student loan debt is again a matter of debt which should be the purview of Congress since Congress handles all budgetary matters.
Yeah. Honestly, this wouldn't be a problem if we just had publicly funded universities like every other fucking country in the universe, but, whatever.
I think that a mix of public and private universities would be good.
I'm not saying you couldn't have private universities in addition to publicly funded ones. I'm just saying, if this was actually the purview of the government, if they were government funded schools, just like every other type of school, prior to higher education, then this wouldn't be an issue. Because that's where I'm at with it. I see it as, we already pay for grade school, we already pay for high school, we already pay for preschool and kindergarten. Why not a 2 to 4 year degree
I
at,
honestly think,
at like a trade school or a community college or something?
I honestly think that why don't community colleges offer 4 year degrees?
Because that would make too much sense and would solve too many problems, I guess.
Like it doesn't make sense. Like just make a bare bones, no nonsense, no extra stuff university for people who just want to go in, learn, get their degree, go out and do whatever career that they had planned on. No extra stuff. No like having to stay in the pay extra money to for like dormitories or anything or like teams or all this extra quality of life stuff. Like if you just want a bare bones education, you can go in and get out, you should be able to do that, and it'll be a hell of a lot cheaper.
Well, and to reference our favorite Romanian for a second, in a lot of countries, that's how universities fucking work. But because because we have these like perverse incentives and these ridiculous half measure things, it's like, well, we can't publicly fund universities, but we can't privately fund them either. So it's like we're caught in this Boschian hellscape of worst of both worlds instead of best of both worlds, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I do have some sympathy because a lot of student don't loan debt, especially in regards to interest, can be very predatory. Um, One thing that I would do though that we might be able to pay for this if we cut down on all the other pork spending that gets put into those big omnibus spending bills. Like if you trim like all the fat, one, you'd probably be the first Congress in the history of the nation to do that, and second of all, you actually could probably pay for some of the other stuff that you would want to do. But the problem is you're not willing to get rid of all the bullshit in order to do
Yeah,
it.
this is why I hate the spending conversation every 4 fucking years, because it's always, should we raise spending, should we lower spending, should we raise spending, should we lower spending? How about we more efficiently use the money we already have instead of wasting half of it on shit that offers no benefit to anyone other than bureaucracy? Because that's the thing. Like, I don't mind the idea of a welfare state. Like, I'm a social democrat at the end of the day. I'm a like Scandinavian style social democrat, and I mean that. I'm not just saying I'm a social democrat when I'm actually a socialist or some shit. Like, I am a Scandinavian style social democrat in terms of policy, classically liberal in principle. Um, to where, like, I do consider it. I'm basically where Green Arrow is in the Cadmus arc of Justice League. And I apologize for the pop culture reference, but the government is there to do for people what they can't reasonably do for themselves. I would add the asterisk to that quote of because that's what we pay them for. And if they're not going to do that job, then what's the point in fucking having them? So I'm fine with, a single payer. I'm fine with treating college like we treat literally every other fucking kind of educational institution. I'm fine with those things. But the issue is, instead of doing those things that actually would benefit people and actually would result in the government doing what's there to do, i.e., do that which, private industry is either impractical to have do or it's a perverse incentive to have do, and provide for the quality of life of citizenry. Like, that's what a government is for. If you're not going to do that job, then what's the point in having you? We're paying you to do a thing, and just like every other fucking transaction in the universe, if you fail to provide the services for which your industry is required, then kick rocks. Then so instead of wasting all this money on shit that benefits no one, does not serve the quality of life of the citizenry in any way whatsoever, and in fact retards it in many cases.
I mean, it does benefit some people, though. It benefits their friends and family, so they can get no bid contracts to build something that no one will ever actually use and will never actually be finished, so they can buy their second house.
Oh yes, I forgot the Black Lives Matter loophole. Hmm. We are technically part of the people, so benefiting ourselves counts as benefiting the people, don't you know? Yeah, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean at all.
That just they just remind me of this. I think it was in New York, but the city wanted to build like a set of stairs, like in this park, for like old people, and so they were spending like I don't know, like 4 or 5 months just going over bid contracts. So this guy who's a
Okay.
carpenter, so this guy who's a carpenter just got some lumber from Home Depot and built the stairs for like $125. And the thing is, like, he was a carpenter who knew what he was doing. The stairs were structurally sound, but the city still had somebody come in and destroy the stairs anyway so that they could do what they wanted to do.
Wait, they. Why wouldn't you just pay the dude? Like, he
That's
did
called
he did of his own accord what you were going to do anyway, and he did it well. And it would actually take more effort on your part to be spiteful and vindictive and knock them down. So just take that money that's already in your coffers, pay the craftsman who did the work. Job done.
well, because Dalton then they wouldn't have the chance to spend taxpayer money to their friends.
Again, I hate. I'm gonna quote Green Arrow here. The government's job is to do for people what they can't reasonably do for themselves. And I would again add the asterisk because that's what we fucking pay them for, and why wouldn't we want to get service out of them? Like, that is literally the only mission statement of a government. Provide for the quality of life of your citizenry in instances where it would either be impractical to do otherwise, or it would be a perverse incentive to do otherwise. Like, those are that is literally the only thing the government is for, and if it's not doing that job, then I demand a refund of tax money because
Don't
we are we are paying for a service for which we are not being adequately um for which we are not being adequately provided. Ergo, there are rules in place when that happens. When you pay for a service that you are not then rendered in any meaningful definition, then you get your money back, and the business itself is closed down, which in this case would be the state.
don't. You are asking politicians to do their civic duty in an intelligent, reasonable, and responsible manner. What else did you expect was going to happen?
I expect to get the money I pay into things. Because again, the government is just taxes and government organizations are exactly like any other transaction. I am paying you to ensure quality of life where, private industry would either be impractical or would provide a perverse incentive. If you are not doing that, then I demand my money back because you have a job you are not doing, and no other industry is allowed to do that.
Getting back to these student loans, like it just occurred to me that one way that the government could help with this is that you know if you're going to already give public funding to colleges, I don't think you should then give student loans, like automatic guaranteed student loans, to the populace because that's just going to encourage the university to increase their prices, which is exactly what happened. Like
Yeah, but
you're
the
already getting
point
money from the government, and then you're giving guaranteed loans to people who will barely be able to afford them. So of course the university is going to try and squeeze every last dime that they can out of people.
yeah, again, the whole point of a publicly funded university is that just like every other kind of education, um, leaving it up to capitalism would be a perverse incentive. I.e., the point of publicly funded universities is to abolish the student loan industry, just like the point of publicly funded healthcare is to abolish the insurance industry because perverse incentive.
Unfortunately, our government does not appear to be run by people who want to do what is even reasonable or
Or
logical.
are incapable of doing so because they're morons. Because they don't
There's
want to chuck
actually
it all up to malice. Large swaths of it are just straight up incompetence. They don't know how to do things, and so they don't get them done. Which
true.
leads us back to the you're not doing the job for which I am paying you as a taxpayer, so GTFO.
I'm sure many of them were affirmative action advances, either through race or gender.
Not Clay, not Clarence Thomas. I genuinely I want to buy that man a beer. He deserves a beer, and I know he probably makes oodles and oodles more money than I do, but we actually found someone in a bureaucracy doing their fucking job. That deserves kudos. I don't mind paying for his beer if he continues to be that based.
Yep. And there's also one more decision. It wasn't from the Supreme Court, but still, it's very important that I think that we should talk about just for a second here. It was a court in Missouri that basically said that the executive branch of the federal government cannot collude with tech companies to censor speech.
Why that even needed to be said, I don't know, but good vibrations anyway.
Yeah, I think it was specifically in regard to things like the way that tech companies would censor people during COVID, how, they would try and censor, vaccine misinformation or, lab leak theory.
Or how
Uh,
ESG is basically the social justice equivalent of the Hays Code.
yeah, things like that. Basically, speech that the government thought would be
Immoral.
inconvenient, immoral, or inconvenient to the public discourse. And
Or both.
yeah, I remember when the Twitter files were getting leaked, and how we actually got to see how hand in glove the government was working with social media companies, which was quite frankly just freaking disgusting.
Can we just naturalize Elon Musk already so he can be president? Can we do that? I vote we naturalize Elon Musk.
I don't know if we necessarily want a president with the private resources and technology to build his own robot army.
I mean, every robot in the robot army is one man who doesn't get blown up, so I'm in favor. And if said robot army is in the hands of Elon Musk rather than somebody else, then yeah, naturalize Elon Musk already.
That would be an interesting campaign. If it would be entertaining, if nothing else.
We will replace the military with a robot military so that none of our good men and women have to be blown up anymore. I would vote for that. I would unironically be like, Chad, yes to that.
Or better yet, we could turn our existing soldiers into cyborg superhumans and just
I
dominate the rest
mean,
of the planet.
I I am not in favor of transhumanism. I don't want cyborgs. I want us to grow up, get over the phantom of eugenics, and actually learn how to do genetic science,
I
please.
mean, we're already basically living in a cyberpunk utopia, dystopia, dog. We at the very least
Yes,
should get
and that's
school
why I
basics.
that's why I want to curtail That's why I want to curtail the lore of the circuit board and the silicon as much as possible. We have the potential for genetic technology is there, and I don't think it's a coincidence that almost all of our life destroying, debilitating diseases, the chronic ones that we don't have any other cures for, are all to some degree or another genetic. Be it Alzheimer's, be it dementia, be it cancer, be it whatever else. Every every remaining major disease we have is genetic in some form or fashion, and yet we don't want to study stem cells or other forms of genetic technology because the specter of eugenics. Yeah, fuck that
Although,
noise.
although we have been doing research with stem cells.
Yeah, but it's so curtailed because the specter of genetics. Just I it's like saying we can't have zeppelins because the Hindenburg happened 80 freaking years ago. I I I want to live in a world where instead of inserting a piece of metal into everyone's bodies, we can just literally go in, give them the like lizard regrowth gene, and boom, done.
Some
Like there are
some
so
some
many more natural ways to do this if we just learned how to use the um the genome in exactly the same way we learned how to use gears and electricity.
Yeah, some people would make the argument that altering with somebody's genetic code is a more unnatural way of doing things than giving somebody like a cybernetic a implant or prosthetic.
It depends on what you alter, and that's why I wish we would get the fuck over our fear of eugenics already. And I'm not advocating eugenics, mind you. I'm just saying the main specter that prevents us from getting advanced genetic technology and solving chronic diseases like dementia and cancer and so forth is primarily the specter of eugenics. Ooh. And just like the main thing that prevents us from getting off fossil fuels is the fear of the nuclear bomb. Ooh. Even though literally only twice has a nuclear power plant melted down to anyone's, in any major way, and one time that was due to communist incompetence, which is a force of nature even stronger than the nuclear bomb, and the other time it was literally because someone was stupid enough to build it on the shoreline of a freaking island, and then it got whacked with a tsunami. So what have we learned? Be careful where you build the fucking things. But that doesn't mean we should either perpetually stick to fossil fuels until we run out, or that we should become a bunch of hippie communist bullshit where we go all the renewable ones when the actual efficient answer to the energy crisis is nukes, and likewise the actual efficient answer to genetic defects and abnormalities is genetic and not fucking plastic and silicon. But eugenics,
Can you
yeah.
imagine if people started putting like mini nuclear reactors in cars like Fallout?
Again, given how safe we're capable of actually making nuclear technology, it wouldn't be an entirely stupid idea. It would take
How,
some finagling, obviously, but again, if we just grew up past our fear of those only two instances of a nuclear meltdown that we know of, and treated it like any other you know high energy, dangerous but ultimately manageable like power lines are also incredibly dangerous, and yet somehow we're fine with sending actual living flesh and blood human beings up into cherry pickers at 5 o'clock in the freaking morning to fix down power lines and probably dying by electrocution more often than we would like.
I think that the only problem, the issue with many nuclear reactors and cars would be like the proper shielding that it would take to prevent radiation
Right.
poisoning.
It would be given the technology we have now, it would be impractical. But just like when we decided to go full tilt on fossil fuels 2 centuries ago, if we actually gave the appropriate resources to, nuclear technology research, it would probably become vastly more efficient, just like coal, gas, and oil did. And the same is true, with genetic technology. Sure, lots of there are lots of megalo style horror stories from eugenics and so on and so forth. But if we actually grew up, got past our irrational fears, and treated it like any other kind of technology that is medically invasive, because there's no getting around it, it would be medically invasive regardless. But if we treated it like every other medically invasive form of technology we have, and respectfully but efficiently learned how it fucking worked, um, we could actually solve at least three, if not more, of the three worst and most debilitating causes of death in today's day and age: dementia, Alzheimer's, and cancer. And honestly, even if we just got enough knowledge to solve those three things and didn't meddle any further than that, it would be worth it.
You know, to end things on a bit of a lighthearted note, when you were talking about you know injecting somebody with the lizard gene to potentially grow back like a missing limb, all I could think was Dr. Kirk Connors from Spider-Man.
Yeah. Although I'm kind of surprised that nobody made the obligatory Zuckerberg joke, because we did spend the last 20 minutes of the last podcast placing our bets on the whole Musk versus Zuck debacle. Placing your bets now, ladies and gentlemen.
So you know, actually, just what came in mind was I remember watching this old movie about this guy who was a comic book fan, and he was working in this like genetics lab, and the lab was actually doing research on like a some sort of spider gene therapy. So he like goes into the lab and allows the machine to inject him with this stuff to like try and gain superpowers,
He
and he
tries
basically
to be.
becomes
He
this like
tries to Spider-Man himself.
yeah, and he basically turns into like this like human spider hybrid monster thing. I
Yeah,
forget
Cronenberg.
I forget I forget what the name of the movie was, but it was interesting. It was an interesting one.
You know what would solve that is if we actually knew more about genetics, which we would if we weren't so piss, pissing ourselves afraid of eugenics. And no, that's not me endorsing eugenics. That's me saying eugenics is bad, MK. But that doesn't mean we should forego any knowledge of genetics, especially when the top three debilitating diseases that afflict people are dementia, Alzheimer's, and cancer, all of which are genetic.
Okay, everybody. I feel like it's a good time to end here. Do you have any final opinions on the Supreme Court decisions that were handed down?
God bless Justice Clarence Thomas, and may you carry on being based, sir.
Yeah, God bless them too. I actually saw on social media people hoping that Biden would get reelected in the hopes that Clarence Thomas would retire before his term would end. And like you're hoping that the guy who's like 75 would retire before the guy who's 80.
No, afraid not. Cope and seethe, ladies and gentlemen. Cope and seethe.
All right, I have been Mystery.
I've been Dalton Morgan, the Authenticator, and we have been the Duality of Man. Cheers, guys.
Bye, everybody.